has a responsibility, and certainly I think it can do better in protecting the financial entities in our country, and should be consumer-oriented, consumer-driven. In the past, the Federal Reserve, I believe, has been a bit too out of sync with the majority of American people in terms of consumer rights, in terms of consumer issues, and in terms of helping people weed through the financial services industry and have access to capital and to all of to mortgages. And so the Federal Reserve, I believe, needs to be a bit better regulated and needs to be a bit more consumer oriented.
Congresswoman, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor this morning was on the CBS Early Show, and this is what he had to say. Washington must demonstrate that it can put its fiscal house in order before the country will see the kind of strong economic growth necessary to create jobs.
Well, I think that we have to, it sounds like he's putting forth a catch-22 situation, which really doesn't exist. Washington needs to invest in providing for efforts to create jobs for the American people. When you look at the fact that we have, as I said earlier, an unemployment rate of over 9%, and in some communities, in communities of color, 11 to 16.5%, which is recorded, then that tells me what Washington must do before we can do anything to get our fiscal house in order. You have to have jobs so people can have money to spend. Consumer spending is a key aspect of our economic recovery efforts. And also, I must say here that, and we met with Mr. Cantor and Speaker Boehner, Congressman Bobby Scott of Virginia and myself, to talk about unemployment extension and why that's so important in terms of declaring an emergency for people who have been unemployed for 99 weeks or more. Many people don't realize, but we have millions of people in our country who can't even get unemployment insurance, unemployment compensation anymore because they've hit that wall of 99 weeks. And so we're working very hard to make sure that we extend the unemployment compensation efforts so that 99ers, as they are called, can receive that kind of relief that they deserve. These are people who want to work. But when you look, and again, going back to what Mr. Cantor said, when you look at our fiscal house, you're looking, first of all, at people who can't spend money because they don't have a job, and you're looking at people, you're looking at a number of 4 to 1. There are 4 individuals seeking one job. And so we have a serious problem in our country where we have not created jobs because the Republicans won't do that, and we need to do that so that we can begin to get our fiscal house in order.
Representative Lee, we've talked a little bit about Afghanistan, your views there. How do you think the President and the U.S. is handling the Libyan crisis?
Well, I personally believe, first of all, we know what Colonel Gaddafi is about, and he certainly has been a brutal leader, and he does not need to, and we know the Libyan people deserve better, and that he should not be that head of state. I mean, I think that the Libyan people deserve the chance to, forward in their own country. And I think that we do need to make sure that civilian lives are protected and that we do not allow for a humanitarian crisis. But I was one who early on, Peter, believed that the president should have come to Congress. We should have debated this. And I voted against in 2001, giving then President Bush and any subsequent president a blank check to use force in perpetuity. I don't believe that is constitutional. I believe that we should have debated that resolution, a resolution. Should we go? Should we use force? Many people would have voted for that. We would have had an opportunity to look at alternatives, to look at the facts on the ground, to look at whether or not we have to, at some point, we may have to put ground troops. The president said no. I hope we don't do that. We, in the Defense Authorization Bill, Congressman Conyers led the effort to put a provision in that said no ground troops in Libya. Will be supported. And so I think that we should have had that debate, and the American people would understand more clearly what we're doing in Libya. I was in NATO at the beginning of the bombing to try to understand NATO's role and what the U.S., how the U.S. was going to back off, NATO step up, and what that meant in terms of our U.S. forces. And so I think there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, and I think that a full debate in Congress should have been held. And I think that we should have voted. I mean, this is a war. And personally, an authorization to use force even is not a declaration of war. If we're going to engage in a war, Congress and our Constitution requires that we declare war. And so I'm not pleased with how it happened, and I think that we need to find a path forward where there's congressional debate and the American people, because we're the people's representatives, deserve their voices to be heard in that debate.
Do you think that the U.S. has had a cohesive policy when it comes to dealing with the several Arab uprisings that have happened this past spring?
I don't think it's been cohesive, but the administration and there are different points of views on this. I personally believe that our foreign policy, and I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee for about 11 years, needs to be consistent as it can be, and cohesive. I believe, though, there are others who believe that we have to see our foreign policy on a case-by-case basis. What works, say, in Yemen may not work in Libya. Our policy in Sudan may not be the same policy we should have in the Congo. Well, millions of people in the Congo have been slaughtered. We'll look at what happened in Cote d'Ivoire. Thank God now it's, the violence has subsided. But I think that we need to really begin to look at how we have a consistent foreign policy as it relates to humanitarian concerns. When you see people being slaughtered and killed in Syria and in Libya, what is it that determines, the use of force in Libya versus Syria? I think the American people want to understand better what our foreign policy principles are and how they're acted out and played out in terms of policy. And I prefer personally a more consistent foreign policy that really sends the message throughout the world in terms of what we stand for as a country.
We are talking with Democratic Representative Barbara Lee of California, Harrington, Delaware. Ed, on our independent line, thanks for holding. You're on the air.
Oh, good morning. Listen, after serving this country for 33 years, I've become a real hardened independent. But having said that, my question to the Congresswoman is, I know the Ryans put out something on the Medicare. All I want to do is see the counter. I need to see the Democrats put something in writing that I can debate. They haven't even put out a budget in the House ordinance in over 2 years. So where can I judge as an independent? How can I judge what their side is when I don't see anything in writing? We got to do something, people. This country is sinking quickly. God bless America.
Sure, thank you very much. And I think that you've seen the Democrats put forth a budget that's balanced, that reflects our priorities, and that really begins to reduce the deficit. As a member of the Progressive Caucus and former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, we put forth budgets, both the Progressive and the Congressional Black Caucus, every year that really sets forth a pathway out of this economic recession, creates jobs, invests in our infrastructure and education, and helps bring our foreign policy and our military policy under control. But what I can assure you, and I think you have seen our votes cast against dismantling Medicare. Democrats want to keep Medicare, want to preserve Medicare, and that in itself, I think, should tell you something about where we're coming from. We're not in the majority in the House, but we have an opportunity all of the time to send this message by our votes and by the amendments that we put forth and by the budgets that we put forth, that we do want to preserve Medicare and we do want to create jobs, and that's what Democrats stand for.
Houston, Texas. Alex, Republican.
Good morning, Congresswoman. I am calling on behalf of the African diaspora movement. I would like to say with a lot of respect that your information on Cote d'Ivoire and Libya is not correct. President Obama stood on top of the Supreme Court of a sovereign country to impose a leader that was given to him by Sarkozy in France. We all know that it is Sarkozy who is running the foreign policy of the United States. When President Bush was in power, we found out how hypocrites the French were. And today in Libya, the information about protecting the lives in Libya is not correct. This is another action from the French to try to eliminate African people. And what President Obama has done in Africa is very barbaric. He's killing many people, and as I'm speaking to you now,